Have you ever stopped to think about how many people actually disappear into the world and what happens to them after no one else is looking? What if I told you that there is a case so strange, so obscure, that not even the authorities could give the victim a name, and that they may never succeed? In a region known locally as the Valley of Death in Norway, a woman was found charred. The face, unrecognizable. The fingers, destroyed. The documents, non-existent. The clothes, without labels, as if someone had erased every trace of their existence. But most disturbingly, it's just that no one, absolutely no one, sought it out. No complaint, no relatives, no trace. This is not a movie story. This really happened. And to this day, decades later, it remains one of Europe's greatest criminal mysteries. Imagine being in front of a burned body, which was carefully positioned between rocks. All around, personal belongings are arranged with surgical precision. Jewelry, a watch, unlabeled bottles, rubber boots. Everything indicates that it was done with intention, with method, with coolness. But why? Who was she? And who, or what, wanted her to be forgotten so badly? You're about to dive into a real-life case that feels like it's straight out of a ritualistic nightmare, where every clue brings more confusion, and every attempt at an answer leads to a new, even more disturbing question. A story that mixes international espionage, indecipherable codes, false identities, and a death that is impossible to explain. Cases like this don't appear every day. They are buried, hidden. They sweep themselves under the rug of history as if they had never existed. But this woman's body did not disappear on its own, and the signs left behind speak, even if in whispers drowned out by fire, of something much greater than a simple death. If you are one of those who are looking for real horror stories, mysteries that no one can explain, and crimes with supernatural elements, get ready, because what you hear now can change the way you see the world. It can make you question how far the truth goes, and where the convenient silence of the authorities begins. What if this woman wasn't alone? What if she knew too much? What if... Were you the next person to disappear, without leaving a single trace? Are you ready to know the case of the woman of Isdal? Because once that story begins, there is no turning back. Let's dive deeper into this real scenario of horror, mystery and crime without explanation. Get ready, because from here things only get more disturbing. And all of this really happened. The day was November 29th, 1970. A family was hiking in Isdalen, a mountainous region near the city of Bergen, Norway. But Isdalen is no ordinary trail. The area is known by locals as Death Valley, a name that is not an exaggeration. During the Middle Ages, the site was used for suicide rituals. By the 1960s, it had already accumulated a dark history of climbers falling to their deaths under mysterious circumstances. It wasn't a place for family outings, and it definitely wasn't a place where anyone should end their days the way she did. The image that family found will haunt your mind. A woman's body, completely burned, lying between large rocks. But there was something even stranger than the corpse itself. The victim's arms were raised, stiffened, locked in the air in a gesture reminiscent of the position of a boxer. This detail is more common than it seems in burned bodies. Muscles contract involuntarily during heat trauma. But what makes this case so much more disturbing is that, while the front of the body was devastated by fire, the back was untouched. How is this possible? How can a body be charred in half so selectively? The smell of burning human flesh still filled the air when investigators arrived, and what they found at the site defied any rational explanation. Around the body were objects that appeared to have been carefully positioned: a watch, jewelry, a broken umbrella, 2 glass bottles, a pair of rubber boots, burnt nylon, possibly from a pair of pantyhose. But there were no documents, no passport, no tickets, no bag, no clue as to who she was or why she was there. The labels on the clothes had been cut, those of the bottles scraped. Everything that could indicate the origin of those pieces had been accurately eliminated, as if someone wanted to erase all traces of that woman's identity, as if the intention was not only to destroy the body, but to erase its existence. It was as if the crime had been committed not only against her physical body, but against her own memory. The police, confused and pressured, followed the protocols. They collected the objects, cordoned off the area, and sent the body for autopsy. And that's when things got even more disconcerting. The examination revealed that the woman had ingested between 50 and 70 tablets of a drug called phenomel, a powerful barbiturate used as a sedative and hypnotic. The amount was enough to kill a human being several times. But the most terrifying thing is that the pills were still in the stomach, partially dissolved. In other words, She had taken them shortly before she died, but they had not yet been completely absorbed into the bloodstream. This raises a frightening question. Was she conscious when she was burned? Or at least still alive? This doubt was confirmed by a detail that completely changed the course of the investigation. There were soot particles in the victim's lungs. This means, irrefutably, that she was breathing during the fire, that she inhaled smoke, that her body, even drugged, still struggled for oxygen while the fire consumed her. And as if all this wasn't gruesome enough, a bruise was discovered on the right side of his neck, a bruise that indicated force, impact, perhaps a blow. Everything pointed to a cruel sequence. She was sedated, violently assaulted, positioned among the rocks, and then set on fire while still alive. Was this a ritual? A punishment? A desperate attempt to cover up something much deeper? The answer was far from simple. On the other side of the investigation, the media began to speculate, and the audience was divided. Some spoke of suicide, others said it was murder. There were those who suggested that the case involved secret cults, espionage, and clandestine operations. And it wasn't just internet theories. The Norwegian police have even seriously considered the possibility of secret agents being involved, and you'll soon understand why. The most shocking, however, was the silence. No one came forward to identify the woman. No reports of disappearance have emerged. No relatives showed up. It's as if it never existed. Can you imagine that? To be someone who has been erased from history, burned alive, left as if it were garbage, and then forgotten by everyone, except for those who did it to you. But fate sometimes insists on leaving traces. And a few days after the discovery of the body, a new chapter began. At the train station in Bergen, the city closest to the scene of the crime, 2 employees found 2 suitcases abandoned in the baggage claim. Inside were pieces of women's clothing, a wig, cosmetics with the tags removed, brushes, a pair of glasses, and money from different countries: Germany, Norway, Belgium, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. There was also a notebook with code annotations. The forensic examination compared a fingerprint found in one of the glasses with that of the dead woman, and there came the confirmation. The suitcases belonged to the same woman burned in Death Valley. But why was she carrying a wig? Why money from so many different countries? Why so many fragmented identities? She was not an ordinary tourist. She was not an ordinary citizen. It was someone who was running away, or spying, or being part of something much bigger and much more dangerous. Police tracked down the hotels she had stayed at in the previous months, and they discovered something unsettling. She used at least 8 different identities, with fake names, varied accents, and paranoid behavior. In several hotels, she asked to change rooms constantly. He avoided contact with other guests. He never left documents visible. The records showed that she spoke several languages: German, French, English, and alternated between them with disconcerting naturalness. But he always hid something, including his face. There were reports that he wore sunglasses even inside hotels, and heavy makeup, as if it wanted to be seen, without really being noticed. Maybe she was being followed. Perhaps he was playing a dangerous game, a game that ended in the worst possible way. The forensic team, trying more clues, performed a dental examination on the body, and they found that the woman's dental work, gold crowns and fillings, was incompatible with Norwegian standards. A dentist said that this type of dentistry was common in countries such as Germany, France, or even countries in Asia. But before they could go any further, the teeth disappeared. You heard that right. During a transition between labs, the woman's teeth were simply discarded because, according to one employee, they smelled bad. It's serious. One of the most crucial elements of the case was thrown away. Or did someone make them disappear? The story gets even stranger when the teeth, along with samples of the woman's internal organs, reappear years later, stored in an abandoned hospital shed. Yes, a shed, with remains stored next to old materials, as if the truth is being hidden in plain sight. With the teeth recovered, scientists used isotope tests, a technology that analyzes the type of water consumed throughout life, to determine where the woman grew up. The results indicated a region between the border of Germany and France, but nothing conclusive. No name, no story, no confirmed origin. Time passed. The mystery grew, and the question continued: who was she? And why did it take so much brutality to silence her? With each new clue, the case delved deeper into the territory of unsolved mysteries. Secret documents, international espionage, manipulation of evidence, conspiratorial behavior, all pointed to something that has never been publicly told. And the scariest thing of all is that even in the face of all this evidence, the official conclusion of the police was that the woman with 8 identities gold teeth, suitcases with foreign money, and a mysterious code died by suicide. Do you believe that? Because the next part of the story can make you completely change your view. What follows reveals connections to intelligence networks, secret agents, buried clues, and the real possibility that Isdal's wife was murdered for knowing too much. And we haven't even begun to explore the darker theories yet. 3 days after the discovery of the body, the investigation would gain a new lease of life, or rather, plunge even deeper into the abyss of the inexplicable. At the Bergen train station, 2 railway employees find 2 suitcases abandoned in the baggage claim, seemingly common like any forgotten luggage. But the content, it was anything but ordinary. What was inside these suitcases didn't just complicate the mystery. They turned it into something that looks like something out of a political thriller, a dirty game of espionage, or even a covert experiment by forces beyond our control. The suitcases belonged to Isdal's wife. This was quickly confirmed through a fingerprint present in a pair of glasses inside the luggage, the only fingerprint recoverable, because the fingers of the body had been destroyed. What were they trying to hide? Upon opening the suitcases, investigators found women's clothes folded perfectly, without any tags. No brand, no serial number, no trace of manufacture, as if everything had been carefully prepared to never be traced. There were also wigs, sunglasses, a comb, a brush, a small collection of cosmetics, and, here the strangeness begins, money. But it wasn't just Norwegian money. It was a disturbing combination. Norwegian kroner, German marks, Swiss francs, pounds sterling, as if she had crossed borders, lived under different flags, or was on a mission. But the item that really caught the eye was a small notebook. The pages, covered in cryptic annotations, looked more like a code than any ordinary record. Lines of letters, numbers, combinations indecipherable to the naked eye. No one understood that right away. Not even the experts called initially. That was the first major turning point. Until now, it was only a case of murder or strange death. Now, we entered a territory that the public itself already recognizes. Disguises, erased documents, multiple coins, coded notebooks. They are all classic elements of covert operations, double lives, international espionage. The police began to cross-check dates, cities, and lodgings using what they could decipher from the notebook. They found that the woman had been in at least 8 different cities in the weeks before her death, staying under false identities in each of them. The most repeated name was Fenella Lortraum, but there were others. None of them, obviously, real. None of them with a history. None of them with civil registration in any country. Phantom identities. In hotels, the pattern was always the same: reserved, evasive behavior. He frequently changed rooms. He avoided eye contact with employees. He always paid in cash. He used different accents. In a hotel, he spoke with a German accent. In another, she appeared to be French. In still another, he used British English expressions. One employee recalled that she always carried a plastic bag from a specific store, located more than 200 kilometers away, as if that small detail had some symbolic function, or maybe it was a kind of sign. Her physical description was repeated, elegant woman, between 30 and 40 years old, dark eyes, long black hair, always well-dressed, with clothes that seemed expensive but neutral. A kind of luxury anonymity, and an unexpected detail. Some witnesses reported an unusual odor, something that was only later identified as garlic. An unusual smell to keep, especially for someone trying not to be noticed. This has spawned bizarre theories. Would it be a method of odor camouflage, a cultural trait, or even a ritualistic detail? The pattern was clear. She didn't want to be found, and if he was running away, it was something that required much more than a false name. It required disappearing completely. The connection with espionage became inevitable. We are talking about the 70s, in the middle of the Cold War. Europe divided, tension in the air, intelligence networks watching everything and everyone. And Norway, although seemingly neutral, was in the middle of the game. It was a route of interest to both the KGB and the CIA, as well as the Israeli Mossad. Documents released decades later revealed that the country was being used as a point of infiltration and collection of sensitive data. Secret naval bases, military experiments, nuclear submarines. It would not be absurd to think that at some point this woman was a pawn, or an agent, in this dark chess. Do you believe in coincidence? Because, you see, a few years after her death, the presence of Russian spies and Israeli agents in the region was confirmed. 4 Mossad agents were even informally interrogated about Isdal's wife. None of them recognized her. Or at least that's what they said. But since when does a spy tell the truth in an interrogation? This silence was louder than any revelation. And while all signs pointed to a woman involved in something much bigger, the official explanation remained suicide. Think about it. Someone who carries codes, foreign money, wigs, and fake documents. Do you decide to take dozens of pills and then burn yourself alive? Does it make sense to you? Years later, science entered history. The woman's body, as we said, had teeth removed and then mysteriously found. With this, it was possible to do an isotope test, an analysis of the type of water consumed throughout life, which reveals the geographic region where the person grew up. The result was surprising. The data pointed to an area between the border of France and Germany, a culturally complex, linguistically and politically sensitive area, especially in the times of the Cold War, an area where many spies were recruited, trained, and infiltrated. Her DNA was also analyzed. The results showed that she was of European descent, but there were genetic variations that could also indicate a North American origin. This ambiguity further fueled the theories. What if she was a double agent, or someone who defected from an organization? In 2016, Norwegian police created a new sketch of the woman, more realistic, based on modern facial reconstruction technology. The face that appeared was as ordinary as it was disturbing. It didn't attract attention. There was nothing memorable, just as a spy should be. The portrait was included in an Interpol Black Notice, an international notice that attempts to find relatives or information of unidentified people. But, as expected, no one responded. No one claimed to know her. No one showed up to say, she was my sister, she was my friend, she was my coworker. Nothing. An almost unnatural silence. And here I need to ask you, have you ever seen anything like this before? Have you ever known a case where a person disappears completely, without origin, without history, without end? Because if you've seen it, write it here in the comments. She never existed. I want to know who here also feels that shiver down their spine when everything points to the impossible. With each new piece of information, the mystery of Isdal's wife ceases to seem like an ordinary crime. It is as if we are looking at a narrative custom-made to be forgotten. A carefully controlled story where the connection points are purposely left open, a plot written by invisible hands. Because if she was really a spy, then every step she took, every name she used, every trace she left, it was part of something that none of us were allowed to understand. But what if she wasn't a spy? What if she was running away from something much darker, something that not even governments could completely cover up? In the next part, we'll dive into the deeper theories. And when I say deep, I'm not just talking about government conspiracies. I'm talking about secret cults, from human experiments, of obscure rituals, theories that aren't just fringe, they're too terrifying to say out loud. If you've made it this far, write in the comments. This was not a suicide. Because if you feel what I feel, so you already know. The truth that comes next can change everything you think about security, about identity, and about what the government itself is capable of hiding. And remember, the scariest part hasn't even started yet. And now, after all this, there remains only the question that echoes like an ominous whisper in the depths of our most primal fear. How exactly did this woman die? Because as much as the official version says one thing, everything we've seen so far screams the opposite. It's as if someone is desperately trying to push a simple explanation for a scenario that's far from ordinary. And maybe, just maybe, the explanation is something none of us are really prepared to face. But we're going to face it anyway. The first theory presented to the public was the most convenient: suicide, an extreme act committed by a woman alone, distant from everyone, who would have ingested between 50 and 70 tablets of phenomal, a potent sedative, and, for some incomprehensible reason, decided to set herself on fire while she was still alive. But that doesn't make sense, because the autopsy showed that the pills had not yet been completely absorbed. That is, she was not yet unconscious when the fire started, and there was carbon monoxide and smoke particles in her lungs, meaning she was breathing as she burned. Have you ever stopped to think about the pain, the agony of being consumed by the flames while still conscious? This is not suicide. This is torture. And beyond that, let's consider the scenario. Would she have climbed to one of the most isolated and rugged spots in the Isdal region, a trail where even experienced climbers avoid venturing, carrying gasoline, pills, carefully arranged personal effects, and then lying down between rocks to die alone? And would you still have taken care to remove all the tags from clothes, documents, and personal belongings first of all? Who does this when they are going to kill themselves? No. This explanation does not hold up even in the most poorly written films. But if it wasn't suicide, could it have been an accident? This was the second theory raised by the Norwegian researchers. According to this line of thinking, the woman could have accidentally burned herself, perhaps using a hairspray near a makeshift campfire. The problem is that this bonfire was never found. What's more, there was clear evidence of gasoline use at the site. No one carries gasoline on a walk in the middle of the forest. No one unintentionally drops a flammable product on himself and, coincidentally, dies, with his clothes lined up around his body, with all objects carefully arranged next to him. This is no accident. This is staging. It's a macabre mise en scène, an explicit attempt to manipulate the crime scene. The scariest thing? The scene seemed more like a ritual than anything else. And if you're thinking this is all too weird, know that you're not alone. Since this case came to light, dozens of investigators, journalists, former agents, and scholars from all over the world have been poring over this mystery, and almost all of them agree on one thing: she was murdered. But by whom and why? This is the third theory, and perhaps the most convincing so far. The hypothesis of homicide gains strength not only because of the technical elements of the scene, but also because of the pattern of concealment that was meticulously followed. The woman was sedated, burned alive, and had her identity erased with frightening precision. If she had been trying to flee alone, she would probably have left traces at some point. But the traces she left were controlled, as if someone was behind every step, making sure that only certain clues were found. And when you start thinking about these details, it's impossible not to raise an even more disturbing possibility. What if she knew too much? Think about it. A woman traveling alone through Europe in the middle of the Cold War, with multiple fake passports, using disguises, changing accents, cities, names, loading codes, being seen near military installations, avoiding contact with everyone. This is not the behavior of an ordinary person. This is the behavior of an agent. And everyone knows what happens to agents who are considered risks. They are silenced. Definitely. But what if she wasn't just a spy? What if she had discovered something so dangerous that even her superiors decided she should disappear? This theory, as frightening as it sounds, begins to make even more sense when we remember that even the official bodies involved in the investigations, such as the Norwegian secret police, have shown hesitation and inconsistency in their statements. First, they say that espionage has been ruled out. Later, they admit that they investigated this possibility in depth. Then, they claim that there is no connection with international intelligence. But in documents leaked years later, the woman's name appears in internal security reports. How can such a contradictory narrative be trusted? In addition, there is an element that few like to address, because it touches on a type of fear that is beyond the logical. And if what happened to Isdal's wife is not only linked to espionage, but something else, something that lives in the shadows, something that operates beyond agencies, beyond governments, something that uses people as pieces of a game that we will never fully understand. Several theories have emerged over the decades. Some point to secret societies that perform concealment rituals. Others speak of human experiments carried out by clandestine agencies under the pretext of scientific advances. There are still those who believe that the woman was the victim of a pact, of a symbolic elimination ceremony, as if her death represented the end of a mission that will never be revealed. And as much as all this seems exaggerated, the fact is that no one ever came forward to claim the body. No family, no friend, no colleague, nothing. As if it had never existed, as if his presence in the world had been carefully erased even before death. And how to explain this? What would be the chance of a Western-looking woman in the middle of Europe in the 70s, traveling to so many places without leaving any legitimate record of her existence? Do you feel that too? That sense that there's something bigger hidden beneath that surface? In 1971, she was buried in a cemetery in the city of Bergen. The police chose an airtight zinc coffin that prevents decomposition, in the hope that one day someone would come to identify it, and the body could be exhumed. Tulips and carnations were placed on the lid, a symbolic gesture, a burial without a name, without a past, without a face. And to this day, no one has come to pick her up. Nobody. It is said that the zinc coffin was chosen because it allows the body to be transported to another country, in case the family shows up. But between us, did they really expect that? Or did they already know from the beginning that no one would come? It is at why this moment that the story goes beyond the limits of crime and enters the territory of the supernatural. Because there is something in the case of Isdal's wife that does not fit into any logic, not even the most conspiratorial ones. It is as if we were dealing with an entity, a symbol, a presence that never wanted to be understood. And maybe it never will be. She was burned alive. Yes, but why? By whom? And most importantly, what did she know? Leave in the comments. She knew too much. If you believe that this death was more than a common crime, if you feel that something is wrong from the first minute of this story, then tell me, what kind of secrecy can justify such brutality? And more, do you believe that it really existed? Or are we facing a construction, an artificial identity, created to perform something specific, and then disappear? He writes here, she never existed, because perhaps this is the most terrifying truth of all. Maybe she was a shadow, an instrument, a figure between realities. And the most sinister, there may be others like her, traveling right now, sleeping in hotels next to where you are, sitting in the front seat of the subway, passing you on the sidewalk, unnamed, no identity, no past, and you'll never know. So stay tuned, because in the next episode, we're going to dive even deeper. And what you'll discover, it can change everything you think you know about the world. See you there.